Okay, and we're recording now. Hi everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Isabeau Knight. I'm a young writer and the middle grade fantasy author of the Enchantria series. And today I am super excited because I am going to be chatting with Rosanne Parry, the author of some wonderful middle grade books. Um, Including the ones I've read, which are A Wolf Called Wander and Last of the Name, which again are both wonderful books. Both of them brought me to tears. And so, yeah, I am super excited to have Rosanne with us here today. Hi, welcome to this interview. I'm so glad to have you here.
Hi, Isabel. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and it is, incredible to have you here. And to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your books, and how the idea for Last of the Name came about?
Sure. My name is Rosanne Parry, and I live in Portland, Oregon. I live in a farmhouse that's more than 100 years old, and I'm very lucky to have a nice big backyard with a lot of old orchard fruit trees, apples and pears, and I have a little tree house in my backyard that I like to work in the summer. So I love where I live. I love my town. Isabel and I were chatting earlier about bookstores because I also work part-time in a bookstore. So just very part-time during the year, but Christmas is coming up, so I work many, many more hours right before Christmas. So I have that coming up. Before I was a writer, I was a teacher, and I loved helping my students find just the right book for them. And I loved how with my students and with my summer camp counselors, because I worked in a summer camp for a while, and my own four children, I love how much I love the staying power that stories have for them, right? Like if I gave you a list of 10 facts about wolves, you would probably forget all but three of them by tomorrow. But if you read a story about wolves, you're going to remember 100 facts about wolves, and you'll remember them for a long, long time, right? It's like
Yeah,
I don't know, it's like a magical property of stories. I kind of love that. So
yeah,
when I was staying home with my kids when they were all little, I thought, ooh, I have this moment in the middle of my life, and I didn't know if I could write a story because, to be honest, I am super bad at spelling. Spelling is not my thing at all. I also could not definitively tell you where the comma goes. People don't even agree where the comma goes. So annoying, right?
yes,
so so I felt like I was a bad writer when I was in school because even when I knew like what was on the paper was correct, it came back to me with all those things circled that I had done wrong, which made me feel like I was a bad writer. When the fact is, I've always been good at making things up. Um, and so I would say I was a discouraged writer for a while, but I took that moment when I was home with my kids and I thought I'd just give it a try and see how far I got and it's gone pretty well so far. So my
yeah.
book, A Wolf Called Fire, that came out in February, is my 11th novel, and it turns out if you don't stop writing them, you can continue to have published books. So so that was fun. So Last of the Name was one of the ones that you were talking about, and this is about Irish immigrants. It's set during the American Civil War. When my kids were young, they all did, they're grown now, but when they were younger, they all did Irish dance. You know, that hopping up and down with all the banging and the
Yep.
kicks and the loved it. It was super fun. We just had the best time with it. And it was a really lovely community, and they got to meet dancers from all over the Western United States, and they got to meet lots of musicians too, which was really nice. People who played the violin and the accordion and penny whistle and the bagpipes and all those traditional Irish instruments. And because this was based in a tradition, an Irish tradition that was part of my family's heritage, we got interested in the history of Ireland and the history of Irish people in America. And so we sort of, all of us learned about that as we were going through this process of doing all this dancing. And I really loved it. And my son loved to dance, loved it. And so, of course, when he was younger, I was like, oh, I should see if there's a book about a boy who dances, right? Because there aren't that many, I'll be
Yeah.
honest. And the only books that I could find about boys who dance were about boys who did ballet and who were teased mercilessly about ballet because of it being too feminine. My son's experience of dancing Irish dance is that nobody ever mocked him for it or told him that the dancing was like too girly or something. They did tease him because he was literally dancing all the time. He'd be like going down the hall of high school and go, hippity hop, click, spin, turn, and they're like, stop dancing. But they didn't like bully him for it. And so I thought, oh, that'd be interesting to write a story about a boy who dances, who just loves to dance, not suffering through being bullied or any of that, but just somebody who felt a deep connection, a deep cultural connection with that dancing. And so that's sort of was my starting point, is I wonder if I could come up with a story about a boy who dances. And then as I learned a little bit more about American history, and I learned about the Civil War draft riots. Um, Boy, that's a part of the Civil War story we hardly ever talk about.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, oh, that would be interesting to sort of fold that in there. And so that's kind of what got me started on that journey. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really love that. And like I really do agree with you on that because have I don't think I have really read that many middle grade books where there are like boys who dance.
Mhm.
To be fair, I don't read a lot of middle grade that involves dancing, which I like I really want to, but it's hard to find those because the place I usually get books is Kindle Unlimited, and I don't usually find that many on there.
Yeah. Well, and I think the books about dance are often about ballet and
Yes.
about a ballet school, and that's one very particular piece of dance, but there's a whole world of dancing.
Yeah.
My kids' high school did a diversity day assembly every year, and so they would do their Irish dancing there. But there were some students who did the classical traditional Indian dancing,
Ooh.
super elaborate costumes, amazing. And there were some kids from New Zealand who did a haka every year, and there was a salsa club from who were so many of the Spanish speakers in our audience belonged to that salsa club. And so there was literally like people with dances. None of them were ballet. They were other kinds of dancing from all over the world, and it was really lovely, right?
Yeah.
There were some Russian students who did a little bit of traditional Russian dancing, and and there was a boy who was Hopi Navajo, I think, and he did some of the hoop dancing that they do. That's a very particular thing and super amazing to see. And so when I was seeing these assemblies too in high school, I was like, oh, there's so much more to the world of dance than just that ballet thing that gets talked about. And so that was also something that I wanted to be like, this is the piece of dance that I understand the best. And so I hope there will be many more dance stories about classical Indian dance and salsa and powwow dancing, all of those things, right?
Yeah, I agree. And it is amazing that you were able to like see so many different dances from so many different like countries and cultures. Like that must have been amazing. And
My neighborhood, they're all right here.
yeah. And, last of the name is historical fiction, and also please ignore the background noise if there is any. I do live in Thailand, which means a lot of motorcycles and also people watering the plants and such, and so just ignore any background noise you hear.
Okay, fair enough.
And yeah, so last of the name is historical fiction, and it is an absolutely wonderful one. And what inspired you to want to write historical fiction, and what was the research process like?
So I've always loved reading historical fiction. I read it a lot when I was younger. I think it's interesting. I love the way a book can take you someplace. someplace different, and especially as a young person, you kind of are where you are, right? Like you live in the house that your parents chose for you and you go to the school, not necessarily of your choosing. And like I didn't even share a bedroom with a person of my choosing. So there's a lot that you don't get to choose when you're young. And so I love the ability of a book to take you someplace new. And I love how a lot of the things that we're struggling with now in America are things we've struggled with for a long time, right? I mean, at the time in the 1850s, before 1840, Irish citizens were less than 10% of the population of New York City. And then the Great Hunger comes to Ireland, this sort of politically induced famine. And all of a sudden, in the space of a decade, 25% of New Yorkers are Irish, right? That's a huge change, huge. And were people ecstatic to see all those Irish people? They weren't, right? And it made them nervous. They all spoke strangely. They did this weird dancing that nobody else did, and they seemed very foreign, and so it made people nervous. Just like immigration, I think, makes people get worried that there's not going to be enough, right? And have been for a long time. And so it was interesting to take a look at that and go, oh, all the things that people are like panicked about now about immigration, and not just in America, in many countries, right, have always been an issue, and yet human beings migrate, and how would you stop it? I think you could not stop it any more than you could stop butterflies from migrating, right?
Yeah.
It's just a part of life on this planet, is that living creatures move from one place to another. And so it was fun to take a look at that issue, which is a contemporary issue, but also a historical one, and just think about how it operated then. And yeah.
Yeah. And so, what was the research process like for this book?
Well, I was fortunate in that in the time that I was working on researching this book, my son qualified for the World Championships of Irish Dance, which was in Dublin. So that was super exciting. He was really jazzed. All that jumping up and down in my kitchen, the hole in the kitchen floor from all the jumping up and down. It paid off in the end. He had such a good time. It was really lovely. And so he and I traveled to Dublin together, and we had a couple of days before his competition and a couple of days after, and we got a chance to travel around a little bit and see some of these historical places. And they had this model of a famine ship, a sailing ship, basically, that took Irish immigrants during the famine to the United States. And so we toured it just to see what it was like, and it was quite, small and dreary. But the thing that really surprised me was they said during those years, the largest category of immigrating Irish person was a single girl traveling alone between the ages of 12 and 24. That was the largest category of them. And they traveled alone. And I was like, really? Because I had daughters in that age. And I was like, I don't think I would let them to go to a country alone now, on an airplane with modern transportation. It just seems so far, right? But the reason that they went is because at that time, because America was in the process of throwing off slavery, those northern households that had Black servants, it suddenly, because of the emancipation of slaves, it became very unfashionable to have Black servants. Now, those were paid servants in the North. Those servants were paid. They got a salary, right? But it just became very unfashionable to have them, right, around the time of the American Civil War. And they also realized that they could get these Irish girls for less money. And so people dismissed their Black servants and they took these Irish girls in instead. And for them, who had been in a country where they were starving, for them to have a job where you got food every day and a roof over your head and a salary besides, that was game changing for them. And game changing for their nation too, because these girls came to America, thousands of them, and they had food and shelter and a salary, and so they sent that money home to their families in Ireland. And for the first time in Irish history, really, Irish people had a source of income the British could not take from them, and it changed their nation forever. Right? It was a game changer, right? And so I was like, oh, that's very interesting too. And so that's how I sort of conceived of this idea of this brother and sister traveling together and showing up alone in New York and needing to find jobs. And for the girl, finding domestic help was not that hard to do, right? She could find a job as a domestic. The brother, though, his options were slim. He could go on an orphan train to the middle of nowhere in the American West and work for a farm family, or he could join the Union Army. And seriously, they took boys as young as 9. I know. Isn't that awful and shocking? I mean, they didn't fight. They did things like carry messages and they did drumming, and they did things, stable care of horses, that kind of thing. And often the boys who were that young would enlist with their fathers, right? So, but 12-year-olds enlisted alone. It was not that uncommon. So, yeah, I know, it was like, wow. So, yeah.
Yeah. And hold on. It'll be grief. I have lost track of the. Let me pull them up again.
That's okay.
Right. So, were there any parts of this book that were like hard to write, like any specific scenes or plot threads or characters, etc.?
Well, I knew I wanted to write about the New York City draft riots because those were a really painful part of New York City history, right? And fraught. They're the worst race riots this nation has ever had. And so that was hard. It was the violence was much more dire than I depicted on the page, right? I sort of chose only a few episodes in that rather than the whole thing because it was quite brutal, right? But I also, with the story, I want to open up an idea of a thing or a topic so that my reader, if they're interested in it, can learn more. Or if it's like too much, they can go, ooh, maybe I'll think about that or learn about it later. But at least you know that it's real, right? This thing really happened. And if I want to learn more about it, I can, right? And also in the back of the book, I realized that the race riots were mostly between white Irish people and Black people in New York. There are several books that are written by Black authors from that Black perspective, and they're listed in the back of the book and well worth a read. I found them super valuable too.
Yeah. And like the characters in Last of the Name and also in your book A Wolf Called Wander, which I really loved. They really both felt so alive and just leapt off the page. And so how do you normally develop your characters and figure out, like their personality, their past, and just really like make your characters feel alive?
That's such a good question. I really, when I'm thinking about a character, I'm always wanting to think about what does this character care about the most, right? Not just what do they look like, what's their background, what's their setting, but also what do they really care about, right? When Kathleen and Danny first get to Ireland, they just have to survive. They're in this big city all by themselves. They don't have any money, right? And so they just have to survive. That's the only thing before them, right? Then once they have food and shelter, then they start caring about different things, right? And and the same with the wolf in A Wolf Called Wander, right? He's Wolves are social animals, right? One of the reasons that I write about them is that they have bonds with their pack that are very similar to our own bonds with our family, right? And um, so all of those emotional opportunities that humans have, they have too, right? The loyalty to each other, and being lost from your family when you're an animal, man, that's rough, because like they're not going to call. Who will they call? It's not like they can hop on the phone and fix that, right? And so um, thinking about what would that mean for an animal who's loves his pack and is loyal to it and then loses them, then what is he going to do, right? And so thinking about that, what do they want the most, what do they need the most? Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think that is also how I normally try to develop my characters as well. Although I
Hmm.
have, like, I do struggle with developing my characters a lot, but I do agree that, like, once you do find, like, what they really want, what they really care about, like, what they
Hmm.
really need to learn and such, and once you have that figured
Hmm.
out, that will, like, typically drive the story forward, I suppose.
Yeah. And part of it too is just also discovering like what sort of trouble is available to that character.
Yes.
Right? I set A Wolf Called Wander is set in Oregon, right? If I had set that in the Arctic, right? Different trouble would have been available to him. Polar bears, not a problem in Oregon, but an issue in the north, right? The cold and the dark, that would be an issue that isn't so much in Oregon. If that same story was set in the desert, different trouble available to him too. And so I do think about that too with my characters. Is not also for this character in this setting, what sort of trouble can they get into, right? What trouble is available to them? Historically, the kind of trouble that is available um, to us is different. The likelihood that either you or I is going to die of cholera, thankfully, small, right? But are there dangers now for us that weren't in the 1850s? Yeah, there are
Yeah.
some new and different dangers, right? So that's also has been a fun way to think of it, is like what is the available trouble, and
Yeah.
so what is my character gonna try and navigate?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to think about it. And do you have a favorite character of yours that you've written?
Oh gosh, I have, you gotta kind of love them all, you know?
Yeah, that is
So
true.
so I will say in my book that came out this year, A Wolf Called Fire, which is about Wander's brother. His brother Warm is the main character in Fire. And what I loved about that character and was really good for me to think about is that he's, instead of being an alpha wolf, he's an omega, the lowest ranking wolf. And and but he learns how to become a leader in his own way, right? And one of the things that I learned when I was researching wolves for my book is that um, research wolf biologists sort of assumed that it was always going to be the biggest wolf and the strongest wolf and the fastest one that would be the alpha in the end. But that's not really true. Actually, a better predictor, and I love this, they said a better predictor for which wolf pup will grow up to be a leader is the wolf pup that chooses the game that everybody wants to play is more likely to become a leader, whether he's big or small, right? Or fast or slow, right? But that sort of social ability to get the pups to play together and enjoy the same game, that was a better predictor of leadership. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so I in that story I have my wolf, Fire, ends up alone with all these pups that and no pack to help him hunt for them. And so but he's not the biggest one, and he's not the fastest one, and he's not the best hunter. And so he has to figure out, his own way to be a leader, which is different than the way his father was a leader, and the different than the way his more dominant brothers were leaders. And so so that was really fun to think about. Like, there's more than one way to be a leader. It isn't
Yeah.
being the meanest one and being the biggest one and being the loudest one isn't the only way to lead. And so that was fun to think about.
Yeah, and I really loved that theme in the story as well. Like, I think it was just, such a beautiful theme. And, it's a theme that I oftentimes like to explore in my own writing as well.
Hmm.
And, like, so in Last of the Name, the main
Hmm.
character, Danny, has to pretend to be a girl. Hopefully this isn't too much of a spoiler. I think I saw this in like the book blurb of this book on
Yeah.
Goodreads. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, so if you read the book blurb, you will probably already know, which technically I guess it doesn't count as a spoiler.
I think it'll be okay. He and Kathleen are like alone in New York, and they have to get a job, and Kathleen is like, you are not joining the army. And so she bullies him basically into dressing as a girl so that they can get a job together and stay together and have food and shelter. And you know, it's not a bad plan, actually. Right? It's a much safer option for him. And I sort of love how that it was very fun to write the scene where they come to this decision about what he's going to
Yes,
do.
like I loved that scene as well. And some of the times when like Danny was like complaining about having to pretend to be a girl, some of them just had me absolutely laughing out loud.
Yeah.
Especially like the
Yeah.
scene where Kathleen tells him that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was those were fun to write. And because when I was young, I can think of maybe a half dozen books that I read in historical books in which a girl dressed as a boy.
Mhm.
And I was like, how come it's never a boy dressing as a girl? And then as an adult, I was like, oh, it has to be an advantage to be a girl. And I mean, historically, there aren't very many situations historically in which it's an advantage to be a girl, right? Which is kind of discouraging, right? And I thought, oh, but this one instance for the Irish, this availability of domestic labor for Irish girls in America, that was hugely advantageous. And so I thought, oh, I could do this thing. So then it was I couldn't resist it, and it was really fun and fun to think about. And he's young and he has an unchanged voice, so he can pass for singing this in the same register that a girl would. And he loves to dance anyways, so it just seemed like a natural fit, and it was really fun to play with and to see, and what does that mean, and also what does it cost you to pretend to be something you're not,
Yes.
right?
I
I
love,
mean, they did it
yeah.
because they had to survive, but did it take a toll on him? It did. It was wearying to his soul to have to pretend.
Yeah. Like I just,
But
like a thing I really just love is like how you manage to just weave all of these scenes into your story and also like again, I found that part of the story where Danny has to pretend to be a girl very like interesting and also so much fun to read because, as you said, it's typically the other way around. So I
Mhm.
found it really interesting to find that it was actually like not the case in this book.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, so this question. And, as I've mentioned, I also loved your book, A Wolf Called Wander, and a friend recommended it to me, and I just really loved it. And so, can you tell us a bit about the story and how you got the idea for that?
Well, thank you. So this story was inspired by this wolf who's on the back cover. Let's see if you can see it there. There we go. There he is. OR7 is a wolf in Oregon, so called because he's the seventh wolf to wear a radio collar in Oregon. He was born in 2010, I think. And anyways, around that era, like 2010 to 2012, he was a young wolf. He lived in um, northeastern Oregon in the Wallowa Mountains. And he dispersed from his pack when he was 2 years old. That's not very unusual for a wolf. Maybe about half of them do disperse from the pack that they were born in and go join another. Everyone assumed he would turn east to Idaho, where there were hundreds of wolves, but instead he went west towards the ocean, where there are zero wolves. And we knew that he was going that way because he had a radio collar that pinged every 6 hours. And so the Department of Fish and Wildlife, who was tracking him, was like, I wonder what he's going to do over there. Like, how far is he going to go? What will he do when he gets and doesn't find another wolf, right? And to everybody's amazement, he ran 1,000 miles in a month. This was we hadn't tracked that many wolves, and so people were astonished that he would go that far in just a month. And then not only that, so he went all the way from the Wallowas in northeastern Oregon to the Siskiyous in southwestern Oregon, 1,000 miles. But then while he was there, he found a wolf where nobody has seen one in like 90 years. So so that was amazing too. So he got there, he founded the Rogue Pack, because they're in the Rogue River watershed. And they had pups every year for 5 years. And that pack, their sons and daughters moved down into California. They founded the first packs in California in 100 years. It's a real wilderness success story, right? It's really exciting. And I thought, that's awesome. that really happened. It's kind of story shaped already. And so I was thinking about it and I thought, oh, I wonder what it would be like to have that experience from the wolf's point of view, right? Because wolves don't like people very much. I'm sorry to report, we have hunted them for thousands of years. They have remembered that about us, and they do not like us at all. So so I thought, I wonder if I could write a story. This was my dare to myself. Can I write a story from the point of view of a wolf with no humans in it that is still interesting to humans to read? That was sort of my dare. And so I didn't know if it would succeed, but I gave it a try, and I really liked how it came out. It took a while to find a publisher who's willing to publish it, but I think the thing that made the biggest difference was these lovely illustrations by Monica Arminio. Aren't they amazing?
Yeah, I
There
loved
are
those illustrations.
so many of them. There's another one. I mean, they're just astonishing. And some of them are just little bits of nature, but then a lot of them are like action shots. So Monica Arminio, let me find her name there. There it is. Monica Arminio is the illustrator. She lives in Madrid, Spain. She's you can find her under her name on her website. She has amazing art. She does some animation work too. But I love what the illustrations brought to the project. So that was really nice. And then also they let me put a bunch of nonfiction stuff in the back. So there's a map in the back, and of all the places, and there's a bunch of photographs of actual wolves. And oh, this was my favorite part. This is a life-size wolf track, right? So you can like put your hand over it to see how big it is, or put your dog's paw on it. Because I mean, wolves do kind of look like dogs until you see their tracks and you're like, that's huge. The only track bigger in North America, the only track bigger than a wolf's track is a bear's track, and a bear's track is only like a half an inch bigger. They're huge tracks. It's
Oh my.
amazing. I
Yeah.
know. The first time I saw them in the wild, I was like, yikes. I'm going to find out where those tracks are going, and I'm going to go the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, yeah, and I also just really loved, how you managed it, like in A Wolf Calls Wander, how you managed to just really capture that sort of raw feeling of the wilderness and really
Mhm.
capture like what it would be like to be a wolf. And so like how did you do that and did you ever struggle with it?
Well, I'm very fortunate that all the places that the wolf goes in that story, they're pretty much all on public land in Oregon. That means that you can hike on it and camp on it, and there are roads to drive on, and so I was able to visit all of those places, right? And so in order to really think like a wolf, I had to like get myself down to, I'm not especially tall, but I would get myself down to wolf height, right? And I would be like, okay, now that I'm this size, what can I see? And what can I hear? And what can I, like, if I put my face right down to the ground, what can I smell? Right? Because wolves are very much creatures of hearing and smell. And so just going to those places and going, well, what does this really feel like under my feet, right? When he's up in the mountains where like leaves and pine needles have been falling for centuries, the ground is very springy and soft, right? But then when he's out on the prairie, a bunch grass prairie has like clumps of grass that are so tight you can't walk through them, and then bare dirt in between. But that bare dirt is like really hard packed and it's gritty. And so I would walk around on my bare feet and go, well, this is very different from the mountains, right? This is hard, this is gritty, it feels rough, and um, so like that kind of a thing. I
Yeah.
was I was fortunate that I was able to go all those places and have those sensory experiences and really think about what it's like. So I would say in the places that I was stuck, going back to that firsthand experience and asking myself, well, what is that really like? Right? Like out in the middle of, a rural area and empty road in the mountains. I was trying to think about what that would be like for a wolf to cross a road. Because after poaching, road strike is the second most common cause of death for wolves. And so roads are quite perilous to them. And so I just sat out on like right beside a highway, and I just sort of sat there and listened to cars, because there's plenty of time when there's no cars at all. But then when a car went by, I was like, oh, what is that? What does that sound like? What is that? You can feel it, right? And the whoosh,
Yeah.
um, those big trucks, they push air in front of them and you can feel it coming. And I was like, oh, if my body was covered in fur, I would feel that even more than I do.
Yeah.
Right? Um, like if you think about how the wind feels when it blows through your hair, and then imagine if your hair was covered your whole body, right? That would be a very different feel, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's like that kind of a thing. It's like,
Yeah.
what would that really be like?
Yeah. And I really love like how you like really like really did all of that, and I think you definitely really managed to capture that, feeling of wilderness and feeling of like being a wolf really well in your novel. And I think that is honestly one of my favorite parts of this novel. Like I am not even certain I would be able to write that.
Hmm.
And yeah, I
Well, it'd be fun to try though, right?
yes, and like I do
So
plan to write a book about owls someday. Maybe. I have a long
uh,
list of books I want to write, but
yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Yes. And all right. So how did you get started as a writer, and what is your process of writing a first draft? And, again, please ignore any background noise.
I actually can't hear them. So yeah, I can only hear your voice. You're doing fine.
Okay,
Um,
good. Also I am recording audio on my microphone, so the microphone might be picking it up. So I'm uncertain.
yeah, we'll see. Anyways, so as I said, I didn't really intend to be a writer because I was quite discouraged about writing as a student, but I love to read and I love stories. And so when I had some time in the middle of my life, I thought, well, I'll just give this a try, because I didn't know if I could succeed. And so I thought I'll just give this a try, and if I haven't gotten anywhere by the time my youngest child is in kindergarten, then I'll just go back to teaching, a job that I love. So that was kind of my plan. It was like, I'll try this for a while, and then I'll stop if it's not working or if I don't like it, right?
Yeah.
And so but the good thing about that is that I had some time, so I wrote a bunch of different kinds of things, right? I did write some things that were fantasy. I did write some things that were realistic contemporary fiction. I wrote some historical fiction. I'm not very interested in writing for adults because grown-ups are quite boring to me. And so, seriously. Plus, they already know how to read. So, I've always been happy to stay in the children's writing sphere. Um, but I just tried a bunch of things, right? And then once I had a bunch of different things, I sort of sifted through them. I got a writing group of people that could help me. Because, for example, I do all this research about wolves, and then I write a scene, but I don't know what a normal person knows about wolves, right? And so having a critique group go, okay, this was great, and I could see that clearly, but what the heck is going on here? I have no idea, because that, it's like, never heard of that. So, so having a critique group to help me think through, how can I be clear? How can I be true to the intention of the story? That's very helpful. So I've always been grateful for my writing group. Um, and then it was just a matter of, finishing off some things and finding a literary agent and submitting to different publishing houses until I found one that would work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with you on like critique groups because like I'm not really in a any sort of critique group, but I do have like friends who are writers and they really help a lot with writing and especially like when you get stuck on like the plot or something and
Mm.
like if they have read your stories and like they can provide feedback on like how they felt about like characters and plot and they can also like give you some ideas and like you can brainstorm with like ways to move forward and so yeah.
Yeah, and having more than one set of eyes on the
Yes,
project, and people
definitely.
who can say, or who have some experience that I don't have,
Yes.
or a person in my critique group was just writing a scene that happened in an emergency room, and somebody else in the group had just been to the emergency room with their child, and I was like, I'm pretty sure nobody would leave this child alone in this room. Pretty sure a grown-up always has to be in the room. And they were like, oh, you're right. I do think that's true. Like, yeah. So we were like sort of brainstorming collectively what our experiences of the emergency room were. And so yeah, it's helpful. More than one person thinking about it, or
Yeah.
somebody going, well, I know who you can ask. This person is an ER nurse.
Yeah.
If you have a specific question, you could call her and ask her. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And last but not least, what is your
Mhm.
advice to young writers who really want to start writing and just get their stories out there?
Well, one of the great things about writing, unlike being a teacher for which you need a certificate, or even driving a car for which you need a license, you don't need anyone's permission to write. You don't need a fancy degree to write. You're a writer when you pick up your pencil and start writing something, right? And I love that, right?
Yeah.
It's very democratic that way. Anybody can do it.
Yeah.
And so I think having some confidence and thinking about what story delights you the most, right? I think it's not possible. The notion that you're going to write a story that everybody will like is a little nuts, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody doesn't like the same thing. But having a specific audience in mind, like I don't know how to write a story that all children will like, but I have lots of nieces and nephews, and I'm like, oh, this one would love this story, right? They're so into this thing. That would be really fun, right? And so trying to delight one person with your story, odds are if you've written a story that really deeply appeals to one person, it will actually appeal to many people, right? And so, and many, many books have been written that way. The Chronicles of Narnia were written for, C.S. Lewis wrote them for, I think, a niece of his, um, who was quite tiny when he started them and in college when he finished them. But, but he was just interested in delighting that one reader, but he wrote a story that's, endured for decades since. So
Yeah.
that's pretty.
Yeah, I really love that. And that is, fantastic advice for young writers because I agree, you can't please everyone with your story. And, like, especially if you are very much like a perfectionist like me,
Hmm.
that is really important to keep in mind because, if you're a perfectionist, you will want your story to be perfect and amazing.
Uh-huh.
But, like,
Hmm.
like, not everyone will think your story is perfect. Like, one reader might love it, another reader might not even like, say, the genre you're writing in. And so,
Hmm.
yeah, I think that
Yeah,
is really important to keep in mind.
and that's why we need so many stories and from so
Yeah.
many different points of view, right? When I work in the bookstore, I don't always recommend this book to everybody because I'm like, this is a circle of life book. Animals in it hunt and eat other animals. And if that's like too yucky for you, maybe don't read this book. There are many other books in which that doesn't happen, right? And so the book isn't for everybody, right? Each book has its own reader. And so I would also say have some faith that if you write something that means something to you, you will find a reader for it, right?
Yes.
So yeah, just honing in on that thing that delights you the most, helpful.
Yes, I agree. And that is why a lot of my first drafts are very much just completely self indulgent drafts. Like, I just throw in every single thing that I want to
Uh-huh.
see in a book. Because honestly, like, that is like, once I usually get to the middle, I get a bit bored with the plot and such. But, like if I just throw in a lot of things that I just love and I
Mhm.
just love to write and, without
Mhm.
worrying about what others think, then, like that makes it slightly easier to continue writing the story.
Yeah, and you can always adjust that
Yeah.
the next through too. Lots of times I'm like, I wonder if I really need this scene, but I'll go ahead and leave it there. And then when I've done the whole thing, I'll look at it in a more organized way and go, "Oh, I actually don't need this scene." Or sometimes I'll be like, from here to here is more of a hop than my reader should make. I think I need something in the middle there.
Yeah.
Um, to make the ending more clear. Or like the emotional thing that happens here that made you cry would be more impactful if I set it up better earlier,
Yeah.
right? That kind of a thing, you have to write a whole draft and before you can get to that part of revising. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are all of the questions I have for you today. Thank you so, so much for being here and for doing this interview. I know a lot of the people who do follow my YouTube channel and also my blog really enjoy your books. So, yeah,
Excellent.
yeah,
Thank you so much for inviting me.
yeah. Thank you so much for being here and, for writing these amazing books, which, again, I really enjoyed. And it was, amazing having you here.
My pleasure. You take care now.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye. And I'm going to stop recording.